I'm going to be upfront with you on this one. The GameSir G8 Galileo is by far, by a huge margin, the best telescopic controller available for your Android or iOS device right now. It beats the Razer Kishi, it beats the Backbone One, and it beats GameSir's own previous offerings. However, it also has some huge, and in my opinion, completely unacceptable problems that may well be game-breaking for some people. Let's take a deep dive into the GameSir G8 Galileo and see what makes it so good and so bad. And the first thing I noticed when I received the G8 Galileo was how much effort GameSir had put into the box. The last device I got from this company just came in a cardboard box with brown cardboard inside. But the G8 box has been completely decked out and is presented beautifully. You can definitely tell this company is proud of this product. Inside the box you're going to get the Galileo itself, along with 3 interchangeable thumbsticks. I really love that these are included, but guys, couldn't you have included 2 of each? This is kind of useless to just have one, unless you want me to buy the others. Anyway, you'll also get this little box of information leaflets and the GameSir chicken sticker. I must have like 5 or 6 of these now, but I always like getting them. And here's the G8 Galileo itself, and I have to say I think it looks absolutely fantastic. They've gone with this grey and purple theme, kind of like the old Super Nintendo controllers. And you can kind of tell right away that this isn't your grandma's Razer Kishi. This controller is a whole different evolution on the concept of a telescopic controller. In the past, these devices have really been about being compact and staying out of the way. But the G8 Galileo says forget that, this is a full gamepad for your phone. And that is exactly what you get here. Every single part of the G8 Galileo is a premium controller. The G8 doesn't care about being compact, and it doesn't care about being portable. The GameSir G8 Galileo is a full console-quality gamepad, and that is of course what makes it so good. With this controller you get full-size analog sticks, face buttons, and a D-pad. You also get complete analog triggers, and a full-size controller grip. The controller supports smartphones from 115mm wide to 185mm wide. However, this thing is super easy to mod, and at that point it can support anything up to around 12-inch tablets if you're crazy like me. If you want to learn more about how to do that particular mod, check out the video that's available on screen now. It's super easy to do, takes about 3 minutes, and is just an awesome experience. Trust me, once you have an 8-inch tablet in this controller, it's really hard to go back to anything else. But anyway, I digress. On the right hand side here, you're going to see GameSir's trademark pivoting USB-C connector. This is a wonderful feature that makes it easier and safer to connect your device, and reduces the risk of your USB port getting ripped out or the connector itself getting ripped out. And the inlay here has a generously thick layer of rubber to protect your device's sides and back. And the gill pattern on the left and the right side allow your phone speakers to work properly too, by directing the audio up and towards you instead of just muting it. Also on the front of the device you're going to see a menu and a start button, a button for screenshot, mode, and the GameSir chicken button. Along the bottom you're going to see a USB-C port which can be used for pass-through charging on your device. You'll also see the 3.5mm headphone jack. And with this you can use your phone's headphone jack if it has one, or add one to it if it doesn't. That means you can bring your own wired headphones, which is such a great feature for this device, especially if your phone doesn't have a headphone jack. This is expanding the capability of the device you plug into the controller, which is just fantastic. By the way, I also came across a Reddit thread where users were complaining about degraded audio quality or electrical interference when a charger is connected to the G8. I tried really hard to find this problem, but I just couldn't find it. But of course I'm never going to discount actual user experiences, so just be aware that there may or may not be issues with microphone and audio quality when you're charging using the G8. Of note is I actually did a system update right before trying to test it, so maybe that fixed something, I'm not sure. On the back of the controller you're going to see these big expanded grips which have a laser etched texture for comfort, and it feels great in the hands. You'll also see the L4 and R4 macro buttons which can be programmed independently. Along the top there are the shoulder buttons which have a dotted texture, and these are very similar to the GameSir T4 series like the T4 Collide and the T4 Cyclone. A very welcome addition to this controller. As if all that wasn't enough, this controller actually has interchangeable faceplates. They have a very solid attachment using magnets, and you can just pull them straight off. And you can see this kind of transparent plastic design underneath which just looks so premium. Now as of making this video, there aren't any faceplates available, but I'm sure there will be soon. In addition, with the faceplates removed, you can easily swap out the analog stick caps for whichever ones you like. Well anyway, we've been here for a while and we haven't even talked about the controls, so let's go ahead and do that. In summary, well, the controls on the G8 Galileo are essentially perfect. Well, really close to perfect. Usually here I start with the analog sticks, but this time I'm going to focus on the D-pad first. And that's because GameSir do not have a good track record of D-pads. In fact, the last GameSir I reviewed, the T4 Cyclone Pro, had one of the worst D-pads I've ever seen in my life. But this is not that D-pad. This is a really well put together, clicky, tactile D-pad. It has a very satisfying bowl shape that your thumb can rest in easily. And then you can just roll this D-pad around to your heart's content. It's super clicky and crunchy and feels really great. The tactile clickiness makes it easy to know when you've hit a specific direction. And the D-pad has basically no accidental diagonals whatsoever. I think this design is just really amazing overall because your thumb just sits in the middle of it and you can just move it slightly to hit your directions. In my experience, it's been really good for extended gameplay sessions with the D-pad because it just doesn't tire out my thumb or anything like that. I really couldn't praise this D-pad enough, especially given GameSir's track record of D-pads. It's absolutely fantastic, and well done GameSir for this. Anyway, moving on to the face buttons, these are really lovely as well. They're a membrane connection, unlike the T4 Collide's clicky switches, but I really like them nonetheless. They have a really kind of heavy thunkiness that's really satisfying and tactile. And I also think the size of them is really nice too. They stick up far above the shell when you push down on them, and honestly, they're just great. I love this glossy dome shape. I think this is my favorite shape of face button, and it works really well here. I think actually these might be the clickiest style of membrane-based buttons I've ever used. They're just really tactile and great actually. Seriously, everything about this is fantastic so far. Now let's talk about the triggers and shoulders. These are almost identical to the T4 Collide, which, if you know anything about me, I loved those shoulders. L and R are tactile clicky switches and feel great thanks to the dotted texture on the top of them. And then the triggers themselves have absolutely no friction whatsoever when you push down on them. It honestly feels like you're pushing down on air, it feels so nice. And I think that GameSir really have a winner with the shape of these buttons, with this kind of inward curve and then the dotted texture on top. Again, no complaints here whatsoever. And now it's time to talk about the analog sticks, and if you had asked me 1 week ago, I would have told you that these are fantastic. These are Hall effect analog sticks, so although it's never been tested, they should theoretically never experience drift. And they feel absolutely amazing. It's so nice to finally have full-size analog sticks on a controller for your phone. And they work absolutely fantastically. And it really does feel like you get a bit of a leg up on the competition in some games with this controller, simply for having these big and amazing analog sticks. They also have anti-friction rings, which makes the sticks a lot smoother when you roll them around the outer edges. And going even further than that, of course you get the interchangeable sticks in the box too, so you can use the stick that suits your preference. To reiterate, I really wish I got 2 of each sticks, but whatever. So what's the big problem then? Well, a few weeks ago I was playing Vampire Survivors of all things, and in that game I don't do anything except roll around the left stick. And then out of nowhere the left stick began to grind. It almost felt like a piece of sand or something had gotten trapped in here and was scratching everything up. But I didn't find anything like that. The problem was really apparent for a little while and then it kind of lessened. But ever since then, this left stick has just been a little rougher than the right stick. It's not unplayable by any means, and I haven't stopped using the G8 because of it. But I feel like maybe there might be a microscopic nick on the anti-friction ring or something like that. The ring itself does seem pretty thin, but I'm not really sure how that works. And to be honest, I thought that this was just going to be a freak issue with my unit until I found a Reddit thread with people complaining about the same thing. I'm assuming that this issue is just with a thin anti-friction ring. And thankfully this part is actually consumable and can be replaced. All you need to do is to loosen the clips and remove the ring and put another one in there. And you can buy these for like 12p a pop on AliExpress. So it's not the end of the world if this is an issue with the ring, but it has worn down a lot faster than I would have expected it to. One last note on the anti-friction ring, it does visibly look a lot thinner than on some other controllers I own, so I'm guessing that's the problem here. Anyway, my final complaint about the analog sticks is just that I wish that they had metal shafts. I find that improves the smoothness of the stick a huge amount versus plastic. and of course by its nature it wouldn't wear down as quickly. I'm planning to get some replacement sticks. You can buy them on AliExpress or even on Amazon for a bit more money, and any Xbox compatible analog stick replacement should work here. If I find a good one that works well, I'll put it in the description box below. Anyway, moving on, the last buttons here are the L4 and R4 macro buttons on the back. These sit easily under the thumbs without being too easy to press, and they have a nice muted click when you do want to press them. I really like that these have kind of a smooth and more slippery plastic, which really differentiates them from the textured grip. All in all, when it comes to controls, it's really hard to criticize the G8. Nearly everything is perfect except for that friction ring issue. And yet, even with all that in mind, this controller still blows away the competition in every conceivable way. There is no controller I would buy for my smartphone except for this one. But obviously that's getting way ahead of things, so let's talk about gaming with the G8 Galileo. Of course, the primary focus for this controller is mobile gaming. And here I have the Poco X5 Pro, which I totally didn't buy just to use with this controller. And as you can see, this controller fits perfectly in the Galileo. And then, well, Android gaming is just Android gaming. And when you find a game that has controller support on Android, and you play it with a big screen phone like this, the experience is seriously good. Of course, there are questions like notches and screen ratios and all of that when it comes to gaming on Android, but the Galileo is definitely an accessory that enhances your experience by like 1,000,000,000%. The controller works perfectly whether you want to play retro games or modern games on Android. And when you play a game that's compatible with this controller, something like Combat Master, the experience is second to none. I can't put into words enough just how much of an uncompromised gaming experience this is. I mean, gaming on your phone has always been compromised compared to using a controller. And then using a telescopic controller has always been a compromise over a full controller. The Galileo has completely demolished that gap. It's the perfect way to turn your phone into a genuinely enjoyable gaming experience over long periods of time. And the full controller grade inputs are just fantastic. The analog sticks are incredibly accurate and perfectly sensitive. The analog triggers work great in games that require them, such as rally games. And the D-pad is even great for retro gaming too. Honestly, other than the aforementioned stick issue, I have absolutely no complaints about gaming with the G8 Galileo. When it comes to playing games on your phone, it's an experience unlike any other, and that really can't be understated. And honestly, I think this is perfect. This is as close to perfect as you could ever get gaming on your smartphone. And I honestly think that GameSir should take some real deserved credit for delivering an uncompromised gaming experience on smartphones. This controller really is that good if that's what you're looking for. But it gets even better than that because, like I mentioned earlier, you can actually mod the Galileo to fit slightly bigger devices. Here I have it hooked up to my AldoCube iPlay 50 Mini Pro, which is an 8-inch tablet with a Helio G99 chip. And this is a fantastic setup with the G8. Sure, it looks a little funky, but if Sony can do it, I can do it here. And this has become one of my favorite ways to play games now. You get a big, beautiful screen and an uncompromised controller experience. So anyway, I think I've just been gushing for like 3 minutes or something, but suffice to say, the gameplay experience on the G8 is fantastic, and it's easily by a long shot the best controller available for smartphones or tablets that you can buy right now. However, nothing is truly perfect, and the G8 has some major issues that we're going to get into now. And the biggest one of those is that this controller does not support an X input mode. X input is a standardization created by Microsoft for gamepad inputs. And it's honestly the most simple way to get gamepad support in a game. And whereas most games work just fine without it, some games don't. And I genuinely cannot understand what would possess GameSir to not include X input support on this controller. Now, whether this is a hugely realistic problem is one thing, because if you never play a game that needs X input, you're never gonna care. But if there is a game that doesn't work that only supports X input, you're gonna have an issue. And in my opinion, if you're making a controller in 2023, you really should support X input. The bigger problem with the G8 Galileo is the GameSir App. The app is what you're going to use to customize your controller, for example where it comes to dead zones or sensitivity or button mapping, macros and stuff like that. But the problem with the GameSir app, and here I'm talking about Android specifically, is that you should not install it on your device under any circumstances whatsoever. GameSir's app actually violates Android security policies, and so by installing the app you're putting your device at a massive risk. In the worst case scenario with this app, you're putting your device and your private information completely in the hands of a company that can do whatever the heck they want to your device. And in the best case scenario that there's nothing nefarious going on, you'll have to deal with constant pop-ups telling you to uninstall the app, along with a constant notification telling you to do the same. Sometimes even when you open the app, it will tell you not to open it. And in fact, when you go to install the app, which you need to sideload from GameSir's website, you'll get a big old warning telling you, don't do this, and I completely agree with that warning. And I've said it before and I'm going to say it again, this is not an acceptable thing. It's not acceptable to have to use an app that violates Android security policies. I have never owned a controller in which this was a necessity, and so I really don't know why GameSir is doing this. And by not installing the app, you need to compromise on so many things. For example, GameSir's own gamepad mapping, and the ability to customize your controller in any way that you like. It's just really bad. And there really is no justification for putting your device and your personal information at risk just to use a controller. It's nonsense. GameSir, fix this. It's terrible. Anyway, so moving on from that particular point, the GameSir G8 has a few different modes. It has a direct input mode for Android, a PlayStation mode, which should theoretically work for streaming games to your phone from PlayStation, although I can't try that, sorry I don't have a PlayStation, and the GameSir mode, which you'll use for mapping your game. My big issue with this came from one of my favorite mobile games right now, which is Call of Duty Mobile. I've been playing this game a lot on my Odin and also on my phone using a different controller. And this game supports X input and some other input modes, and it should work just fine with basically any controller. Except for some reason for the G8 Galileo, which just doesn't work with this game at all. But don't worry, if you've gone ahead and compromised your device and your personal information by installing the GameSir app, you can then map the controls in Call of Duty Mobile to the G8 Galileo. But why would I want to do that when this game has controller support anyway? And if this controller just supported X input, it would work without a problem. Anyway, so let's say I do go through and I map my controls to the GameSir G8. Well, that compromises the game itself too. You see, in Call of Duty Mobile, when you're using a controller, the game can detect that, and the matchmaking will actually match you with other gamers that are using controllers. And that makes for a fair game overall. So controller users aren't facing off against touchscreen users and vice versa. Except that when you use the G8 Galileo, that's not true. You'll be matched with touchscreen users, which, depending on your perspective, may put you at an advantage or a disadvantage versus them. And I just don't think that's a very nice way to play this game. To me, it kind of feels like I'm cheating. And I really don't think it's okay, especially for a game that supports controllers anyway. You could argue that maybe Call of Duty should support more controllers, or maybe that GameSir should support X input and more universal options. But in the end, when the controller doesn't work, it's a huge bummer. And I don't believe that being forced to use an app that violates your device's security policies is an acceptable solution. Well anyway, that's the GameSir G8 Galileo. Let me go over my likes and my dislikes of this controller, and then I'll wrap up at the end. Starting with my likes, the biggest one is of course that this is an uncompromising full gamepad experience for your Android device. It really cannot be overstated how incredible this controller is when it works. It's absolutely phenomenal. As an extension to that, I think that the controls themselves are all fantastic. The Hall effect sticks and triggers, shoulder buttons, the face buttons, it's all amazing. And specifically, the D-pad is really good too, and a huge improvement over GameSir's previous controllers. I love the customizability, how we should have interchangeable faceplates and we have interchangeable sticks already. I love the overall look of this controller. I think it actually looks fantastic even with a big device like a tablet connected. Somehow I think it looks a bit less silly than previous attempts at this concept. I really like the pivoting USB port and the rubber inlay. Not only does it look great, but it works great at keeping your device safe. I like that the USB pass-through lets you charge your device while you play, or at least keeps it topped up if you're doing something really intensive. And of course I love the 3.5mm headphone jack. I think this is going to be a huge deal for players that don't have a headphone jack on their phone. This adds it and it works just great. I like the screenshot button. I forgot to mention it earlier, but it's really nice to have a screenshot button on a mobile controller, and it does work great for Android. And I love the modability of this controller. It's easy to mod and to expand it to support bigger devices, and honestly, playing with the G8 Galileo and an 8-inch tablet, is, I think, one of the best ways to play games in 2024. It's absolutely fantastic. And I love that you can change the volume of your device using the controller itself. You can do this by holding the GameSir chicken and then using the D-pad up and down. This means that it doesn't really matter where the volume keys on your device. You don't need to reach for them, you can just use the controller itself, which is great. And finally, just the fact that GameSir are taking mobile gaming seriously. We've had huge leaps and bounds in this in 2023, especially where it comes to the iPhone running Resident Evil and stuff like that. And so I really hope that controllers like this inspire other companies to do similar things, and developers to release premium console experiences on Android. And now let's talk about my dislikes of this controller. The first being the issue with the stick or friction ring. It's definitely not something that can't be fixed, but it does seem to be a delicate component that may need to be replaced. Speaking of the sticks, I really wish they had metal shafts. I really miss that feature of these sticks. Of course, the next one is the lack of X input mode. I really just don't know why it doesn't support X input. It would make things so much easier for many games. My next dislike is that it simply doesn't work with Call of Duty Mobile. This might not be a problem for everyone, but I really love this game and I wish I could play it properly with this controller. And finally, of course, my biggest dislike is the GameSir app. It is totally unacceptable for it to violate Android security policies. The mapping software may give you an unfair advantage in competitive games, and just under no circumstances should you ever install it on your device. GameSir needs to fix this. It is totally unacceptable, and there are other controller manufacturers out there who do not have this problem. So, what's going on? Why is it such an issue? And that wraps up my review of the GameSir G8 Galileo. In summary, it is an absolutely phenomenal controller, and there is nothing that you can get better than this to play games on your Android or iPhone device right now. There is literally nothing better. It is a fantastic controller in its own right, and that is before you even consider the fact that it's a telescopic controller for your phone. And I think this is really showing the potential for mobile gaming. If we get more console quality experiences coming to Android, and iPhone of course, I hope that more companies will take note of what GameSir have done here and try similar efforts. The Galileo is as perfect as it can possibly be, and it stands so far above its competition that it is really difficult to criticize any part of it. Regardless of anything I've said in this video, I would grab this controller over anything else if I wanted to play a game on my phone. And honestly, I think that says everything. I'm of the opinion that if you have any fleeting interest in playing games on your phone or on an 8-inch tablet, or maybe even a bigger one, you owe it to yourself to pick up the G8 Galileo. It is absolutely phenomenal, and I love nearly everything about it. And now it's time for some breaking news. It appears that the GameSir G8 Galileo has been licensed by Red Magic as their new Red Magic Shadow Blade 2 gamepad. You can now buy this on AliExpress, and it's essentially a transparent black version of this controller. You can bet your bottom dollar that I have one of these on the way, and I'll give you a review when it arrives. But for all intents and purposes, it appears to be the exact same controller. And double breaking news, it seems that a new variant of the G8 has appeared at CES, in a kind of white and grey colour. It looks really nice, and I don't know, maybe I'll try and pick one of those up as well. And triple breaking news, the GameSir X2S is coming as well, which is a follow-up to the GameSir X2, but it will natively support tablets. So I'm really excited for all three of these developments. Let me know what you think of the G8 Galileo in the comment box below. I would love to hear what you think, especially maybe compared to other controllers of this style out there. I also want to say a huge thank you to GameSir for sending me this controller to review. Always enjoy working with you, even though I drag you through the mud way too often. I should note that I've left a link to the GameSir G8 Galileo in the description box below, in a few different places that you can pick one up for yourself. And of course I want to give you a gigantic thank you for watching this video. I greatly appreciate your time. If you did like it, please go ahead and leave a like on it and subscribe to RetroBreeze for more content just like this. And that's this one done. Thank you very much for watching RetroBreeze, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.